baby, she's got it. Straight blue eyes, long black hair, dimple cheeks, and she's no square. She's got it. You can't help it. She was born to please. Can't help it. The girl
In the
can't
early
help it.
hours of June 29th, 1967, a long, gleaming Buick cruised down the dark Louisiana highway. Ahead, a thick white fog rolled across the road, mosquito spray drifting from a truck. Behind it, only the hum of tires against asphalt. By the time the haze cleared, it was too late. The Buick slammed full force into the back of a slow-moving tractor-trailer on U.S. Route 90 near Slidell. The crash echoed like thunder. In the front seat, 3 adults never had a chance. In the back, 3 children woke in terror, crying out, alive but shaken. News outran the dawn. By morning, the world knew Jayne Mansfield was dead at 34. The platinum blonde bombshell, the laughing, voluptuous rival to Marilyn Monroe, was gone. A star who had once dazzled Hollywood and scandalized the press was now reduced to twisted metal and rumor. Tabloids screamed that she had been decapitated. The truth was different, colder, less theatrical. But the accident was horrific enough to fuel whispers for decades. This was not just the death of a movie star. It was the sudden end of a whirlwind. A girl born in 1933 who Fox once crowned the next Marilyn. A Playboy Playmate of the Year, the star of The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. A woman who could turn every press conference into a stage, every wardrobe slip into a headline. Jayne had forced her way into Hollywood with a weaponized smile and a brain sharp enough to play the cameras. In the end, those same cameras would consume her. That night, she rode with her lawyer and lover, Sam Brody, and their driver, Ronald Harrison. In the back seat slept her 3 children, Mickey, Zoltan, and little Mariska. They were on their way to New Orleans, chasing the lights that still called her name. No one knew the journey would end beneath a trailer's steel frame on a lonely stretch of highway. In the years that followed, safety bars were installed on trucks across America to prevent such disasters. They were given a name in the public's imagination, Mansfield bars. Even her death reshaped the road. But stories that end on highways begin in small houses. Before the pink palaces, before the heart-shaped pools, before the staged stunts that made them flip over themselves, Jayne was just
No,
an ambitious girl.
Joan of Arc was made of wood.
Memorizing
Starry skies.
To understand how a star could blaze so brightly and burn out in one catastrophic night, we must return to the beginning, to the childhood of Jayne Mansfield, where the first cracks began to show. Jayne Mansfield was born Vera Jane Palmer on April 19, 1933, in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Her father, Herbert Palmer, was an attorney. Her mother, Vera, was a devoted homemaker. For a time, Jayne's early years seemed ordinary, even comfortable. But tragedy arrived swiftly. When Jayne was just 3 years old, her father died suddenly from a heart attack while driving the family car. Her mother was left widowed, and the world Jayne had known collapsed into grief and uncertainty. In search of stability, Vera moved with her daughter to Dallas, Texas. It was there that Jayne's outsized personality began to show. She was precocious, imaginative, and endlessly curious. While other children played with dolls, Jayne staged performances in her living room, dressing up and mimicking the stars she adored from magazines and newsreels. She wasn't just pretending, she was rehearsing. Her intelligence was undeniable. Teachers remarked on her sharp memory and wit. She learned to play the violin and piano. showing a sensitivity to rhythm and performance. But beneath her talents was an almost desperate hunger, a desire to be noticed, to be admired, to matter in a way her small-town life couldn't provide. By her teenage years, Jayne's ambitions had outgrown Dallas. She married young, at 17, to Paul Mansfield, a man she would have a daughter with and whose last name she would later keep even after their split. To many, marriage meant settling down. To Jayne, it meant leverage. Paul was steady, but Jayne's gaze was already fixed far beyond Texas. Hollywood was calling, and she was determined to answer. Friends and neighbors in Dallas remembered her as radiant, vivacious, and restless. She dyed her hair blonde, practiced poses in front of mirrors, and studied publicity photos of her idol, Jean Harlow. She had already learned one of her greatest lessons. Image was everything. If she could create the right persona, the world would have no choice but to look. With Paul and their baby daughter, Jayne set out for Los Angeles. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jayne knew one truth deep in her bones. She wasn't born for obscurity. She was born for spectacle, and Hollywood, always hungry for the next spectacle, was waiting. When Jayne Mansfield arrived in Los Angeles in the early 1950s, Hollywood was already overflowing with hopefuls. Every diner waitress, every extra on a back lot, every girl with a pretty smile seemed to be chasing the same shimmering promise, stardom. But Jayne was different. She didn't just want to be noticed. She studied how to be noticed. She enrolled in acting classes, posed for countless photographers, and submitted herself to casting calls where rejection was the rule. And yet, unlike so many others, Jayne had a gift for turning rejection into publicity. She made herself unforgettable. Whether it was showing up to events in daring outfits, slipping a wardrobe mishap into the path of waiting photographers, or answering questions with playful, witty quips, Jayne turned every encounter into a performance. Her big break came in 1955, when she was named Playmate of the Month in Playboy. The feature catapulted her from obscurity into the national spotlight. Studios took notice, and soon she signed with 20th Century Fox, the same studio that had once groomed Marilyn Monroe. Fox wasted no time marketing her as Marilyn's rival, a younger, bolder blonde bombshell who could ignite headlines as easily as she could fill theater seats. And ignite she did. Her role in The Girl Can't Help It, 1956, showcased her not just as a pin-up fantasy, but as a comedic talent with timing sharp enough to hold her own alongside established stars. Critics may have scoffed, but audiences couldn't look away. Jayne's combination of intelligence, humor, and unabashed sexuality made her irresistible. She had learned to bend the camera to her will. Soon came Will Success, Spoil Rock Hunter, and a Golden Globe Award for Most Promising Newcomer. She posed for photo spreads, graced magazine covers, and even became the first American actress to perform nude scenes in European cinema, further fueling her scandalous reputation. Wherever she went, flashbulbs followed. But fame was a double-edged sword. For every headline celebrating her, there was another mocking her as cheap, vulgar, or too much. Hollywood could be cruel to women who leaned too boldly into their sexuality, and Jayne leaned all the way in. She didn't just court publicity, she drowned in it. Still, at that moment, Jayne Mansfield seemed unstoppable. She had conquered Playboy, Hollywood, and the press. She had built herself into exactly what she always wanted to be, a spectacle no one could ignore. But as quickly as the dream took off, the shadows were already forming. Studios tired of her outrageous antics. Serious roles slipped away. And the very machine that had made her famous was sharpening its knives. The rise was dazzling. The fall was already on its way. By the late 1950s, Jayne Mansfield had become one of the most photographed women in the world. Her curves, her platinum hair, her mischievous grin, she was everywhere, from movie posters to gossip columns to the stage lights of Las Vegas. She had achieved exactly what she set out to do. She was unforgettable. But Hollywood is fickle, and the same industry that builds idols also delights in tearing them down. Jayne was promoted as the new Marilyn Monroe, but that comparison was a curse as much as a crown. Monroe herself was still at the height of her powers, and Jayne's over-the-top publicity stunts, her infamous wardrobe slips, her calculated accidental nudity, her outrageous one-liners made her seem more like a caricature than a competitor. Serious directors began to look the other way. Still, Jayne remained a box office draw, though often in films considered lowbrow or scandalous. She performed in burlesque-style revues, starred in campy comedies, and accepted European roles that American studios frowned upon. The tabloids loved her, but Hollywood's respect began to fade. She was caught in the trap of her own invention. She had made herself a spectacle, and now no one could see her as anything else. Her personal life mirrored the chaos of her career. After divorcing Paul Mansfield, she married Mussulman Mickey Hargitay, a Hungarian bodybuilder who adored her, and became the father of 3 of her children, including Mariska Hargitay, who would one day become a television star in her own right. The couple's lavish pink palace mansion in Los Angeles, complete with a heart-shaped swimming pool and pink shag carpets, became a symbol of Jayne's flamboyance. But behind the cotton candy facade, her marriages were strained by jealousy, financial troubles, and her relentless hunger for attention. And then came the rumors, the most bizarre of her life. Jayne became acquainted with Anton LaVey, the controversial founder of the Church of Satan. Photographs of the two together fueled speculation that she had embraced the occult, that she was dabbling in dark rituals. Whether true or exaggerated by the press, the whispers of a satanic curse followed her, staining her already fragile reputation. By the early 1960s, Jayne's star was dimming. Monroe had died tragically in 1962, and studios shifted their focus to a new generation of actresses. Jayne was still famous, still glamorous, still adored by tabloids, but she was no longer the Hollywood darling she once was. She clung to nightclub performances, European films, and publicity stunts to stay in the headlines. At the peak of her fame, Jayne Mansfield had the world's attention. But the higher the climb, the sharper the fall. The spectacle she had created was beginning to swallow her whole. By the mid-1960s, Jayne Mansfield's once dazzling stardom was flickering. Hollywood no longer saw her as its golden blonde, but as a fading novelty act. Roles in major films dried up, leaving her to accept appearances in B-movies and cabaret shows. She continued to tour nightclubs, draped in sequins and feathers, performing routines that kept her in the tabloids but paid little compared to her former Hollywood contracts. The endless hunger for attention became a burden. Critics mocked her for clinging to her image, while younger starlets eclipsed her in the spotlight. behind the glitter. Jayne's finances strained under the weight of lavish lifestyles. Pink mansions, diamond-studded pets, luxury cars, all symbols of an empire she was struggling to hold together. Her personal life fared no better. Her marriage to Mickey Hargitay collapsed amid jealousy and spectacle. She remarried briefly, then moved into a volatile relationship with lawyer Sam Brody. Brody was known for his temper, and their arguments often became public. The gossip pages, once Jayne's ally, now relished in painting her as a tragic clown, a woman trapped in the prison of her own persona. And then came the whispers of the occult. Her connection to Anton LaVey, the self-styled high priest of the Church of Satan, fueled rumors that she was cursed. LaVey himself claimed that Jayne was under a hex after Sam Brody mocked his faith. Whether publicity stunt or reality, the narrative of a satanic curse clung to Jayne in her final years, adding an eerie undertone to her already chaotic life. Still, she pressed on. Nightclubs, interviews, small film parts, anything to stay visible. But the crowds were smaller, the applause thinner, the glow dimmer. The once radiant star now seemed to be running from something: age, irrelevance, the shadows she had courted for so long. On June 28, 1967, Jayne finished a late-night show in Biloxi, Mississippi. Exhausted, she piled into a Buick Electra 225 with Sam Brody, their driver Ronald Harrison, and her 3 children asleep in the back. They set off for New Orleans, chasing the next appearance, the next check, the next flash of attention. Just before dawn, on a dark stretch of U.S. Route 90, the dream ended in a burst of steel and glass. The car plowed into the back of a tractor-trailer hidden in a cloud of mosquito spray. Jayne Mansfield was gone instantly at just 34. The headlines exploded: "Hollywood bombshell decapitated." Tabloids exaggerated the horror, cementing myths that persist to this day. The truth was tragic enough. A young mother, a fading star, extinguished in an instant. The fall of Jayne Mansfield was complete. From the brightest lights of Hollywood to the darkest stretch of Louisiana highway, her life had become the very cautionary tale she once seemed destined to escape. In the wake of Jayne Mansfield's death, Hollywood struggled to process the spectacle it had both created and consumed. The tabloids feasted on every lurid detail, splashing headlines of decapitation and curse across front pages. But behind the sensationalism, real consequences emerged, ones that would change American roads, Hollywood culture, and even the way audiences remembered her. First came the practical legacy: safety reform. The horrific collision that killed Jayne also killed 2 others in the front seat. Yet, miraculously, her 3 children, Mickey, Zoltan, and little Mariska, survived in the back. Investigators noted that the Buick had slid beneath the trailer, shearing off the top of the car. The nation was horrified. Soon after, new safety regulations required trucks to install underride guards, metal bars across the back to prevent cars from sliding underneath. They became known unofficially as Mansfield bars. Even in death, Jayne's story reshaped reality. Then came the cultural reckoning. Was Jayne Mansfield merely a tragic blonde bombshell or something more? Fans remembered her, not just for her body, but for her wit, her fearless embrace of sexuality, and her refusal to be ignored. Scholars later argued that Jayne was more self-aware than the public gave her credit for, that she understood publicity as performance, decades before the age of reality television and social media. In her own flamboyant way, she had rewritten the rules of fame. For her children, recovery meant survival in the shadow of her myth. Mickey and Zoltan grew quietly, but Mariska Hargitay, the little girl asleep in the back seat that night, would one day become a beloved actress herself, starring for decades in Law and Order, SVU. Her success offered a bittersweet echo of her mother's dreams, another Mansfield woman who conquered television, but on her own terms. Jayne's death also fueled darker myths. Her connection to Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan became fodder for endless conspiracy theories. Was her crash the result of a curse? Had she been punished for mocking dark forces? Most dismissed it as sensationalism, but the whispers ensured Jayne's story remained tinged with mystery and dread. For all the tragedy, Jayne Mansfield's attempt at reinvention was not entirely lost. In the years since, critics have revisited her performances, noting her comedic timing, her intelligence, and her ability to weaponize her image in ways few women dared at the time. What once seemed vulgar now looks pioneering. In her final act, Jayne Mansfield did what she always did best. She forced the world to look at her. Even in death, she commanded attention, and in doing so, she changed things forever. Jayne Mansfield's life ended violently on a Louisiana highway, but her legacy stretches far beyond the twisted wreckage of that Buick. More than half a century later, her story still captivates, part cautionary tale, part cultural icon, part myth. In life, Jayne was underestimated. Critics dismissed her as a cartoonish imitation of Marilyn Monroe, a manufactured sex symbol who relied on scandal more than talent. Yet time has revealed another truth. Jayne understood publicity as performance. She knew how to turn every headline into free advertising, every slip of a strap into a story. Long before social media influencers, Jayne Mansfield was practicing the art of self-branding. Her death, sensationalized and misreported, only added to her legend. The grotesque myth of her decapitation cemented her as Hollywood's most shocking tragedy. But behind the lurid headlines was a real woman, ambitious, intelligent, vulnerable, who chased the dream with fearless abandon and paid the price for it. Her children carried her name forward. Mariska Hargitay, who survived the crash as a 3-year-old, went on to become a beloved actress and advocate, a living reminder that Jayne's story didn't end in 1967. In Mariska's strength, many see the resilience of a daughter who turned her mother's shadow into her own light. Even the roads remember her. The underride guards on trucks, known forever as Mansfield bars, stand as a silent monument to a tragedy that forced change. Every driver who passes a semi today benefits from a safety law born from Jayne's final ride. And in pop culture, Jayne Mansfield remains immortal. Her pink palace, her heart-shaped pool, her outrageous stunts, her blonde mane and crimson lips, all have been reimagined in films, books, and fashion. She is remembered not only as a woman who lived too loudly, but as one who dared to live on her own terms. Her legacy is a paradox: glamour and tragedy, laughter and loss, brilliance and chaos. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't meant to be. She was spectacular. And maybe that is the message Jayne Mansfield leaves behind. In a world that wanted her to be silent, she refused to stop shining. Even when the spotlight burned her, she stood in it proudly. She became unforgettable.